All right, and going into Monday's sports wagering action, we're 6-0 in our last 6 college basketball tier package bets on BrockPage.com. And the link for today's college basketball tier package bet is in the description section below. $1,000 bettors made over $5,400 using those bets alone. And if you want to see my current personal bet record, you can do that right now for free by going to BrockPage.com. It's located right there on the homepage. Now, you may be wondering what the difference is between what I do here on my YouTube channel and what I do on my website. Well, what I do here on YouTube is I'll handicap the entire slate of games in any given sport, side and total. And what I do on BrockPage.com is I actually share with you which one of these free YouTube picks on my channel that I'm actually betting on personally. We currently have over 785 members who are signed up and active on that website right now. And just remember, guys, if you sign up for a package here today on BrockPage.com, you're actually going to get access to that membership every single day, all the way through the end of April. And with that, guys, let's go ahead and dive into some free NBA action. We're going to go ahead and start off with the Sixers taking on the Pacers. 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off on Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. The Sixers are the 12.5-point favorite on the road in this one. But I'll tell you this much, despite being favored by over a dozen points in this spot here, Philadelphia's really struggled to cover the number over the past week or so. These guys failed to cover in 4 out of their last 5 ball games. And in addition to that, they actually posted a record of just 3-6 against the spread in their last 9. And even though the Sixers have been fairly sound in most aspects of the game this year, they've really kind of found their Achilles heel with regard to offensive rebounding. These guys are actually in the bottom 3 in the league in offensive boards per contest. So certainly an area that these guys are going to want to patch up by the playoffs. Now, they're taking on a Pacer team who's actually amongst the better defensive rebounding teams in the game right now. Indiana currently finds themselves in the top 5 in the NBA in defensive boards per game at home. So this is a matchup that Indiana actually should end up winning. Now, the Pacers also covered the point spread more recently against the likes of Boston, Denver, and Portland. When it comes to the scoring in this one, Buddy Hield is averaging 18 points a game with Indiana, 5 rebounds, 4 assists for Hield. Meanwhile, Tyrese Halliburton is scoring nearly 18 points a game himself with the Pacers, 4 rebounds, 9 assists for Tyrese. And speaking of offensive production, these guys are actually amongst the better home scoring teams in the East. Indiana averages nearly 115 points a game in the Gainbridge Fieldhouse. They're also in the top 10 in the entire NBA in home shooting from the field. Now, injury-wise, Brogdon's questionable, Duarte's out. Meanwhile, for Philadelphia on the other side, they're mostly healthy for the exception of Springer. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Indiana plus 12.5. Next ball game, it is going to be Cavaliers versus the Magic, 7 o'clock Eastern start time. Cleveland's minus 8.5 in this ball game here. And as bad as the Cavs have been playing lately, they did still cover in their last 2 straight, and they play some exceptionally tough defense. Cleveland's still allowing only 105 points a game. They're amongst the better teams in the East with regard to guarding the field goal. Now, scoring-wise, on the other end of the court, Darius Garland is scoring over 21.5 points a game, along with 3 boards, 8 assists. Meanwhile, Lauri Markkanen is scoring 14 points a game himself. He's also averaging 5 rebounds. And speaking of boards, Cleveland's in the top 10 in the NBA in defensive rebounding per contest. They're taking on an Orlando team who lost their last 6 straight. And they covered in only 2 ball games since March 13th. Now, Orlando's biggest problem is their offensive production this season. They're actually dead last in shooting the 3 ball at home. They're also averaging just 103 points a game in the Amway Center. When it comes to shooting the basketball from the field, the Magic's also dead last in offensive field goal percentage at home as well. Now, injury-wise, Carter, Schofield, Anthony, Wagner, and Suggs, they're all listed as questionable for Orlando. Meanwhile, for Cleveland on the other side of things, Mobley's still out with that ankle injury. Now, total-wise, Cleveland saw 4 out of their last 6 fall under the posted number. Meanwhile, Orlando saw 5 out of their last 8 fall under the line themselves. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Cleveland, minus 8.5, getting the job done against the number. Next contest, it is going to be Hornets versus the Heat, 7:30 East. Miami's minus 5 at home here. But despite being red hot right now, Miami may have to go to work without their leading scorer, Jimmy Butler. He's actually currently listed as questionable for Tuesday's game. Now, Miami's also been a bit lackluster covering the point spread. They're covering in only 38% of their contests since March 7th. Now, Miami's biggest issue at the moment right now is grabbing offensive boards. These guys are actually in the bottom 10 in the NBA in offensive rebounding per contest. And speaking of offensive production, believe it or not, the Heat actually tends to shut it down late in games. They currently find themselves in the bottom 10 in third quarter scoring at home. They're also in the bottom 10 in fourth quarter scoring as well. Now, they're taking on a Hornets team on the other side of things who actually got the W in 8 out of their last 11. And they're amongst the best scoring teams on the road in the entire association. Charlotte currently finds themselves in the top 3 in the NBA in road scoring per contest. And they're led by Miles Bridges, who's scoring over 20 points a game, along with 7 rebounds and 3 assists. Meanwhile, teammate LaMelo Ball, he's averaging just about 20 points a game himself, along with 6 boards, 7 assists. Both of those guys, some really, really good offensive production out of them this year. And when it comes to shooting the 3 ball, Charlotte's actually in the top 3 in the NBA in offensive 3-point percentage on the road. These guys doing a great job shooting from downtown when they travel. Now, injury-wise, the Hornets are actually exceptionally healthy right now. Meanwhile, for Miami on the other side of things, Tucker, Butler, Dedmon, and Vincent, they're all listed as questionable to play. I'm going to lean toward the underdog Charlotte Hornets, plus 5, getting the job done against the number. Next contest, Rockets Nets, 7:30 East. Brooklyn's minus 18 in this ball game here. And as shaky as Brooklyn's been playing, you still have to consider the fact that they got the ability to score a whole bunch of points, plain and simple. These guys are in the top 5 in the NBA in shooting from the field. They're also amongst the best in the East in offensive points per game. Now, Kevin Durant's averaging over 30 points per contest, along with 7 rebounds. Now, KD's also drilling nearly 40% of his 3 balls. Meanwhile, Kyrie Irving's making 42% of his shots from 3 land, 27 points a night for Kyrie. Now, they're taking on a Houston club who allows more points per contest than any other team in the game right now. The Rockets are also dead last in defending the field goal. They've yet to reach double-digit road wins this year. Now, when it comes to the injury report, Wood, Schroeder, and Gordon are out. Meanwhile, for Brooklyn on the other side of things, Dragic, Curry, and Brown, they are listed as questionable. But regardless of those injuries, I'm still going to go ahead and lean toward Brooklyn, minus 18. Next contest, Hawks, Raptors, 7:30 p.m. Eastern start time. Toronto's minus 4 in this ball game. Now, the Raptors have played some really good defense in the Scotiabank Arena this season. They're allowing only 106 points a game at home. They find themselves in the top 10 in the NBA in home points allowed. Now, scoring-wise, on the other end of the court, Pascal Siakam's averaging over 22 points a game, along with 8 rebounds, 5 assists. Meanwhile, teammate Freddie VanVleet, he's drilling nearly 40% of his shots from beyond the arc. He's also averaging 20 points a night. When it comes to head-to-head meetings between these two squads, Toronto's averaging 117 points a game in their last 10 games against Atlanta. And I'll tell you what, speaking of defensive problems, the Hawks are in the bottom 5 in the league in guarding the 3 ball. They're also allowing 113 points a game on the road. And speaking of those road games, Atlanta's gotten the W in just 15 out of 38 contests away from the State Farm Arena. Now, injury-wise, Collins is still out. Johnson is questionable. Meanwhile, for Toronto, Anunoby and Watanabe are questionable for them. I'm still going to lean toward Toronto -4, getting the job done at home. Next ball game, it is going to be Bucks versus the Bulls, 8 o'clock Eastern start time. Milwaukee's -4 on the road here, but despite being favored by a couple of possessions on the road, the Bucks lost their last 2 straight, and they failed to cover recently against the likes of Dallas, Memphis, and the Clippers. Now, offensively, as good as Milwaukee's been with the ball in their hands, these guys have struggled shooting from the foul line. Milwaukee's currently in the bottom 10 in road offensive free throw percentage. Meanwhile, defensively on the other end of the court, the Bucks are giving up almost 114 points a game when they travel. Now, they're taking on a Chicago club who has little issues getting to the hoop. These guys are currently in the top 3 in the NBA in offensive field goal percentage. And they're currently led by DeMar DeRozan, who's scoring 28 points a night. Meanwhile, Zach LaVine, he's been dangerous from 3-land this year. He's making nearly 40% of his three-pointers. He's also averaging over 24.5 points a game. And speaking of shooting the 3 ball, Chicago's in the top 5 in the NBA in offensive three-point percentage at home. Now, when it comes to the injury report, Chicago's mostly healthy for the exception of Lonzo Ball still. Meanwhile, Milwaukee on the other side, they're pretty healthy themselves for the exception of Bembry. I'm going to go ahead and lean towards Chicago +4, keeping this one close. Next matchup, it is going to be Blazers versus the Thunder, 8 o'clock Eastern start time. OKC's -4 in this ballgame here, but despite being favored by a couple of baskets in this spot, OKC's gotten the W only 3 times since March 2nd. Matter of fact, Oklahoma City posted a record of just 3-13 straight up during that time frame I just mentioned. And they also have themselves a winning percentage of just around 270 on their home court. Now, when it comes to offensive production in this one, there's really not many teams in the association who are worse than Oklahoma City. The Thunder, they're actually dead last in shooting from the field. And they're making only 32% of their three-pointers this year. Now, they're taking on a Portland squad who covered recently against the likes of New Orleans, Detroit, and Brooklyn. As bad as the Blazers have played down the home stretch, these guys still do a lot of their scoring in the second quarter. Portland's currently in the top 10 in the NBA in second quarter scoring away from home. Now, when it comes to offensive production, Drew Eubanks is averaging 14 points per contest for the Blazers, along with 8 rebounds. Meanwhile, Brandon Williams is scoring over 13.5 points a game himself. When it comes to the injury report, Winslow, Hart, and Watford are questionable. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma City, it's Giddey, Baisley, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who was shut down for the season. Trey Mann's also questionable to play. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Portland +4, keeping this one close. Next game, it is going to be Wizards versus the Timberwolves, 8 o'clock Eastern start time. Minnesota's -11.5 at home. The T-Wolves won their last 2 straight. They scored 136 points or more in both of those victories. And speaking of scoring with the basketball, there's really nobody in the league who's doing it better than Minnesota right now. These guys are leading the entire association in points per game. They're led by Karl-Anthony Towns, who's scoring 24 points a night. He's also making 41% of his three-pointers. Meanwhile, Anthony Edwards, he's averaging over 21 points a game himself, along with 4 rebounds, 3 assists. And speaking of rebounds, the T-Wolves also find themselves in the top 5 in offensive boards at home. Now, they're taking on a Washington team who struggles guarding the 3-ball themselves. The Wizards are currently in the bottom 10 in the NBA in defensive three-point percentage on the road. And speaking of those road games, well, Washington is winning just 34% of their contests away from the Capitol this year. Now, injury-wise, Kuzma and Carey are questionable. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, on the other side of things, McDaniels is still out for them. Beverly is questionable with an ankle. I'm going to go ahead and lean toward Minnesota -11.5, getting the job done against the point spread. Next contest, it is going to be Grizzlies versus the Jazz, 9 o'clock Eastern start time. Utah is the 5-point favorite at home here. And even though the Grizzlies are really banged up right now, it's actually Utah who's really crawling across the finish line here in the regular season. The Jazz lost 6 out of their last 7 ball games, and they failed to cover the point spread in all 7 of those contests I just mentioned. When it comes to defensive play in this one, the Jazz allowed over 114 points a game during that span. Now they're taking on a Memphis squad who won their last 7 straight, and they lost only 3 ball games since February 24th. Now the Grizzlies have continuously proven they can win with injuries this season. And when it comes to rebounding the basketball, there's no one in the NBA right now who's doing it better offensively than the Grizzlies. Now, scoring-wise, Dillon Brooks is averaging 18.5 points per contest, along with 3 rebounds, couple assists. Meanwhile, teammate DeAnthony Melton, he's averaging double-digit points a game himself, along with 4 boards and 2 assists. And speaking of offensive production, Memphis is currently in the top 3 in the NBA in scoring on average per game. Now, injury-wise, it's Adams, Jones, Jackson, Baines, and Tilly who are listed as questionable. John Morant is still out. Meanwhile, for Utah on the other side of things, Forrest is questionable. Azubuike is still out. I'm going to lean toward Memphis +5, keeping this one close and covering the number. Next matchup, it is going to be Spurs versus the Nuggets, 9 o'clock East. Denver's -6 in the Ball Arena. Now, the Nuggets have done a real nice job offensively in their own building this year. They're scoring nearly 115 points a game in their own arena. They're actually in the top 3 in shooting from the field. Nikola Jokic, he's making over 58% of his field goals. He's also averaging 26 points a game. Meanwhile, Aaron Gordon, he's scoring 14 points a game himself, along with 5 boards, 2.5 assists. And speaking of boards, Denver's currently in the top 5 in defensive rebounding per contest. Now, the Nuggets are taking on a Spurs team who lost 7 out of their last 10 meetings with the Nuggets, and they currently have a losing record on the road. And in addition to allowing over 113 points per contest, the Spurs are also in the bottom 5 in the association in defensive rebounding away from home. Certainly some problems for these guys on the defensive end of the court this year. Now, injury-wise, leading scorer DeJounte Murray, he's currently listed as questionable to play. Meanwhile, Pirtle's also questionable with back stiffness. Meanwhile, for Denver on the other side, Green and Najee are questionable for them. I'm going to lean toward Denver -6, laying a couple buckets here in their own building. Next ball game, Pels Kings, 10 o'clock East. New Orleans is -8.5 in this ball game here. But as good as the Pelicans have been down the home stretch, I do still have concerns about their offensive play. These guys are currently in the bottom 3 in shooting the 3 ball on the road. They're scoring only 106 points a night in their travels. And speaking of contests away from home, the Pelicans got the W in just 16 out of 39 road games this year. And that's good for just 41% in that particular category. Now, they're taking on a Sacramento team who won 4 out of their last 6, despite their recent injuries. When it comes to covering the point spread, the Kings got the job done against the number in 5 out of their last 7. Now, scoring-wise, Harrison Barnes, he's averaging nearly 17 points per contest, along with 5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. Now, Harrison's also drilling over 40% of his three-pointers. He's been really good shooting from 3-land. Meanwhile, Davion Mitchell, he's scoring nearly 12 points a game himself. 2 rebounds, 3 assists for Mitchell. When it comes to the scoring in this one, the Kings actually do most of their damage in the second quarter. They're currently in the top 10 in second quarter scoring per contest. Now, injury-wise, Sabonis is out. Fox and Len are questionable. But regardless of that, I'm going to still lean towards Sacramento +8.5, keeping this one close. Next and final matchup of the show, it is going to be Lakers versus the Suns, 10:30 Eastern start time. Now, this game's currently off the board. LeBron James, his status still up in the air. He's technically listed as questionable, although he sent a tweet out that he's shut down for the season, but nothing actually confirmed yet. And I'll tell you this much, regardless of how bad the Lakers had been, it's actually the Suns who kind of put it into cruise control here. They failed to cover in their last 3 straight. They actually suffered an outright loss to OKC in the process of those games. And I really wouldn't be surprised if Phoenix ends up resting a handful of guys kind of last minute. They're not on the injury report now, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up resting a few guys. They really don't need to win right now. They got that thing locked up. But they're taking on a Laker team who's fighting for their playoff lives right now. And as bad as LA's been on the road this year, they're still doing a real nice job of scoring away from the Crypto Center. The Lakers are currently in the top 10 in road scoring. They do a real nice job of making their field goals away from home. Now, if he does end up playing, LeBron's averaging over 30 points a game this year, along with 8 rebounds and 6 assists. Of course, Anthony Davis, he's averaging over 23 points a game himself, along with 9 rebounds and 3 assists. Now, scoring-wise, the Lakers are in the top 5 in the NBA in second quarter points per contest. So if LeBron ends up playing, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the Lakers winning this one outright for some money line cash. And with that, guys, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out on BrockPage.com. If you guys do end up getting a membership here today on my website, just keep in mind, you're going to get billed the day you sign up and then the first of every month following that. So if you do end up getting a membership here today on BrockPage.com, you're actually going to get access to that content every single day all the way through the end of April. I always tell folks in every single video, the earlier in the month you sign up, the better. And guys, if you want to get access to every single bet that I give out on that website, you're going to want to sign up for my board member tier package. Not only are you going to get access to the board member tier let's try that again. Not only are you going to get access to the board member tier bet itself, you're actually going to get full access to every single package that I offer on that website all the way through the end of April. The board member tier is an all-inclusive package. You get everything that I offer. But most importantly, guys, got to thank you for joining me right here on YouTube. Really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. With that said, guys, happy Monday or Tuesday to you, depending on when you're watching this. Best of luck to you. And I look forward to seeing you later on today on my website at BrockPage.com.